I'm going to take you on a short journey of my 50 years of experience with Brazilian rosewood. And I'm going to start out with this disclaimer. I'm not going to give you opinions. You can find opinions on the internet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the physics, the science behind it, and the history as I've gotten it, not from my speculation, but from families and people that have been involved in this, the last 150 years. So with that, let's just start with the history of Brazilian. When the Spanish went in and colonized South America and discovered this material, it became the cool stuff in Europe. It was used for, royal furniture, office paneling, chopsticks, whatever that you wanted really beautiful wood in. And the situation was this beauty doesn't exist in the living tree. You don't cut a Brazilian rosewood tree and see this wood. This is a product, secondary process of decay, maybe bacterial action that creates this beautiful color. So acquiring this wood is not lumberjacking, it's finding this resource where it lay. So it's more of a treasure hunt. And so going back even 200 years to the Spanish acquiring this wood, it was hard to find, it was rare, and it was super desirable. And all three of those things add to how much people had to pay to get it. So of those three things, desirability, scarcity, and just rarity, you take any one of those and accentuate it, and that raises the price. So as it became desirable, it became scarcer, and it became more expensive as time went on. So furniture, pianos, other wood things that were manufactured, mahogany was a more available resource, and it was a big giant tree. It was like cake. And so things that were made out of mahogany were priced lower and usually decorated less. As time went on and guitar making took on Brazilian rosewood as a desirable quality, they put it on their most ornamented guitars and they charged a higher price. The mahogany went into less ornamented guitars at a lower price. And that was the beginning of the stigma that somehow mahogany is inferior in tone to Brazilian. It's not. It's just different. Now we come up to the modern market with Brazilian having been in the best old vintage Martins, et cetera, et cetera. And when the wood was plentiful, a straight grain piece like this was more desirable, not for tone, not for stability, but just processing. A piece like this would dry uniformly, it worked really well, and most importantly for marketing, everybody got a similar looking guitar. Somebody didn't get a beautiful one or an ugly one, or I wish I had the one you have. They all look pretty much the same. But as this wood became scarcer and scarcer, Martin's solution was to make the D35 and a three-piece back. Having explained the marketing choices and the ease of processing for larger companies using straight grain Brazilian rosewood over a more figured one, was an economic choice. The wood itself, both of these woods come from the same stuff, they're just cut differently and expose a different grain configuration as you see here. In the classical tradition, the more fantastic looking, the more desirable. In the American steel string tradition, the more straight was the more desirable. So having told you, you don't have to worry about getting better or worse tone with these, let me bring you to the modern day and explain the difference in current pricing. To get, let's say someone wants a nice old straight grain Brazilian like Martin used to do. It's not my job to convince them otherwise. It's only my job to give them information on which to base their assumptions and make an informed decision. So in that, we will supply a nice old straight grain set just like an old Martin, but it's much harder to acquire. The nature of the tree and cross section is a bullseye, and when you cut a piece from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, it'll show the rings coming in and out like you see here. If you cut a piece from the center of the clock out to 3, 12, 6, or 9, the annual rings run through straight up and down, and you get this straight grain look. So to get that straight grain look takes a much larger tree to be able to get that matching set out of let's say the 8 or 9 inches we need for a book match. And that big tree is really hard to find anymore. So most that you see will actually be a combination of straight and the flat sawn in here. Both of them will sound equal. You won't be able to tell the difference in sound, but the cost of acquiring them will be really, really high. So out of 200 sets, we might have 3 to 5% that would pass for this. And they may have wormholes in them, and they may not be totally suitable for a master grade set. So there's my rationale for why you would pay a lot more for this, but you could get it. But what you're getting is, you're getting something that pleases you, and that's priceless. So I hope that gives you a difference in the difference between straight grain and slab sawn. So now let's go back to the difference between old growth Brazilian rosewood that's cut in a set and it's been around for 75 years versus what is today called stumpwood. And this was that reclamation project I'm talking about, where the trees were cut with a 2-man saw at about this level, and that remainder of the tree trunk stayed. It's not a gnarly stump with rocks and bugs in it. It's the actual section of the tree that yielded the same stuff as the sets Martin cut pre-war. So with that, when that wood is harvested, we can just as likely get a piece that looks like this as a piece that looks like this. And we have, at this point, no use for something that's cosmetically challenged. So there are people that dismiss stumpwood in quotation marks as lesser than an old growth set, but they're not fully informed. They're not realizing that this stump is not the gnarly underground stuff. It's actually a section of the old growth tree. So we can bring ourselves to today, and we do believe that older guitars are better than new ones, and some of us think it was because of the woods available. It is, but as I've said many times, it's also the age of that wood that gives the guitar more resonance. So when we use this wood that's like 100 years from the living tree, the resins have polymerized. It's got every chance of sounding as good as an old pre-war Martin. And that's our idea for offering this wood at a real extravagant price. It's not a huge profit center for us, but with our connections over 50 years, we get it from the right people under the right circumstances, and we're proud to offer it.